will work.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ruby Barlow and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some headlines of this hour. Israeli army spokesman Efi Defrin has stated that the IDF has carried out approximately 3,400 strikes across Iran and disabled more than 150 Iranian defense systems. US President Donald Trump addressed the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer directly on social media, saying that they don't need people to join after the war has already been won. US President Donald Trump has blamed Iran for the school bombing that claimed 175 lives on the first day of active hostilities between Iran and the USA. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has slammed the US-Israel strikes on Iran, saying that the war in the Middle East should never have happened in the first place. US President Trump was there to witness the return of the bodies of 6 American soldiers killed in the Iran campaign. The soldiers were killed after a drone struck a US military base in Kuwait. Caitlin Kalinowski, head of robotics and consumer hardware at OpenAI, has announced her resignation, citing concerns about the company's agreement with the Department of Defense. According to the Egyptian presidency, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulos held a phone call urging efforts to contain regional military escalation, stressing the need for peaceful solutions while urging implementation of the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. According to joint statements, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney have agreed in Tokyo to launch a new economic security dialogue and cyber policy consultative body as they expand cooperation. The two leaders also pledged to expand joint military exercises and defense cooperation. And now to our top story. US President Donald Trump has refused to specify conditions for deploying ground troops into Iran, saying any action would require a very good reason. Trump hinted that troops could be used in the future, but emphasized the current air campaign was just decimating Iran. He also declined to comment on whether troops would secure enriched uranium at Iranian nuclear sites, saying it had not been discussed yet. However, sources say that the US and Israel have considered sending special forces to Iran to secure the material at a later stage of the war. Let's listen in.
What are the circumstances where you'd send in ground troops? How are you thinking about that?
I don't even want to talk about it now. I mean, that's, I don't think it's an appropriate question. You know, I'm not going to answer it. Could there be? Possibly, for a very good reason. Have to be very good reason. And I would say if we ever did that, they would be so decimated that they wouldn't be able to fight at the ground level.
Now joining us live, we have retired Major General Sudhakar, who's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joining us from Jaipur. Major General Sudhakar, it's a pleasure to have you back. First question to you is, domestically, I think it would, well, analysts have said that it would be very unpopular for Trump to put American boots on the ground. Perhaps he's trying to avoid more deaths. As we've seen, he's just attended the funeral of some 6 soldiers who've been killed. Do you think he's weighed up the political domestic costs of more American deaths in this war versus the benefits of speeding up progress in his war if he were to deploy troops on the ground?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, Ruby. Thank you for inviting me for your show. Short, simple answer to your question is no. There is a big as a response to your question. He's actually, makes me believe that these are all very impulsive articulations of behavioral metrics, simply to not to circumvent, but to carry forward the primary driving force. Primary driving force is the internal instability or internal challenges that America is actually facing. In order to avoid them or in order to dwarf them in their enormity and dimension, he is looking around for such kind of opportunities. Now you come to the opportunity, because center of your question lies boots on ground. Is USA as a nation, as a superpower, prepared to have its troops boots on ground? The same USA had to actually stage a very hasty withdrawal in August 2021 from Afghanistan. Why? 20 years of global war on terror did not give USA what it actually wanted. Finally, they had to go in for an agreement with same Taliban and had a quick exit at the loss of many lives. 20 years, they had almost about 2,700 body bags going back to USA, and the domestic constituency kept harping on the point that why are you fighting others' war? So Donald Trump would do well if he asked these questions to himself, that is it US's war? Yes, recently in the national security strategy, he has elucidated that the Monroe Doctrine assumes importance, and therefore he has changed the name to Donroe Doctrine. They are losing their backyard, they're losing the stability within the country. The Epstein file is actually, driving him crazy. And finally, he's looking out 10,000 kilometers, 16 or 11,000 kilometers away to decimate a country which is not going to collapse or break so easily. Back to you, Ruby.
Major General Sadakaji, of course, we've also seen a massive impact on the global markets. We've seen a massive decrease in the amount of oil that's been able to be moved out of the Gulf states, of course, with the closure there of the Strait of Hormuz. The Gulf states have also had a massive impact on their tourism and reputation, as they previously had quite a reputation for a life of luxury and peaceful living for Western expatriates, of course. Do you think that he has taken this impact onto his Gulf allies into account when he's made these calculations about the war, or perhaps even the strain that this impact may have created between the Gulf states, his allies in the region, and the US?
You framed a very long question, but I've understood the sense and the spirit of it. Again, it is yes and no. You see, the bigger picture has to be understood in a holistic manner. Whether he's thinking the way I am going to express and articulate, I really don't know. The bigger picture which is emerging or falling in place is that he's trying to contain China, indirectly or directly. How do you contain China? You contain China by discreetly threatening the serious vulnerabilities or the fault lines of China. What is the vulnerability of China today? China cannot exist as a aspiring global power by 2049 to rejuvenate its Middle Kingdom concept and redeem the century of humiliation unless it remains an economically viable nation state. So to retain its status as an economically viable and as a global power, it has to make sure that the energy security is sustained. And for energy security to be sustained, it has to look for cheap oil and free of interruptions. There has to be steady, consistent flow. Venezuela and Iran, they fall in that kind of bracket. I would say the fly in the ointment, which is missing the woods for the trees amongst the multimedia and international mainstream media platform, is that people have lost track of the core issue. What is the core issue? The core issue is today the supremacy or the dominance of dollar as international reserve currency has fallen. It is stabilizing at around 58%. Sometime back in the peak period of its dominance, maybe immediately after the Brent crude oil agreement was signed with Saudi Arabia in 73, maybe in 80s or so, the dollar is to enjoy a dominance of almost more than 86%. During pandemic, it came down to 54, and the domain experts started saying if it goes down below 50%, well, it will be a kind of an irreversible phenomena. So when the dollar as an international reserve currency falls down to that lower level with a debt of $38 trillion, meaning 1.2 trillion has to be doled out every year simply to service the interest. So you can well imagine the status of a superpower. If the dollar is not supreme and dominant, the fear is lurking. It is not lurking any longer. It is happening. How is it happening? 24th June or month of June 2024, Saudi Arabia, which is a signatory to the Brent oil, crude oil agreement of 73, in which countries who wanted to buy oil, they had to buy dollars first and thereafter carry out transactions and buy oil by paying dollar. Saudi Arabia went on to announce publicly all over the world that the oil transactions can be carried out by non-dollar currency. That is the biggest fear which Donald Trump is actually trying to address. And by taking control of Venezuela and Iran and also dominating the Middle East, he will be able to give some safe breathing space for the shale gas, the break-even cost of which is around $70. So he will be able to project a market and look for the customers for the shale gas that USA is producing. Number two, he will be able to make sure that there is effective control and regulation of the oil in Venezuela, which is the largest reserve, and the third largest is Iran, and carry out transactions through the company of USA in the global market in dollar only, not in any other currency. So these are the issues which he is actually trying to address. How far will he succeed? That I really don't know. But the point which you are making, a point regarding tourism, the safety, stability in Middle East, well, the time will tell us how it is going to pan out. But my take is that more he threatens Iran, more he makes Iran formidable, and they will continue. If push comes to shove, my study and analysis suggests that this country would be pushed to create an ecosystem of a proxy war, and they will not surrender. They are simply waiting for boots on ground of USA troops to come into Iran. They will give it back nice and properly. Back to you, Ruby.
Major General, please stay with us as we move to our next story. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has condemned the ongoing war in the Middle East, calling the conflict unnecessary and warning that force cannot justify harm to civilians. He urged the United States to manage differences with Beijing, create a suitable environment, and avoid actions that could escalate tensions. Meanwhile, Wang criticised countries erecting tariff barriers and disrupting supply chains, saying such actions would immediately backfire. Furthermore, he reiterated that China's relations with Russia remain steadfast and unshakable, even as Western nations criticise Beijing over Ukraine. Wang also warned Japan against interfering in Taiwan, calling the island a core interest and a red line that must not be crossed. He stressed that China will never follow a path of hegemony and condemned the marginalization of the Palestinian issue, urging the UN to take a leading role. Regardless, Wang's remark came amid a rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, South China Sea, and global trade disputes, signaling China's firm stance. Let's listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Minister had to say.
二是不得滥用武力，拳头硬不等于道理硬。世界不能退回丛林法则，动辄使用武力并不能证明自己的强大。民众不能成为战争的无辜牺牲品。国际社会不能接受巴勒斯坦问题再度被边缘化。联合国更有责任在这一进程当中发挥主导作用。动荡与战争并不是巴勒斯坦民众的宿命，中国绝不走国强必霸的老路，也不认同大国共治的逻辑。我们看到个别国家大搞关税壁垒、脱钩断链，这无异于抱薪取火、抱薪救火。所以说，我们讲反噬其身。台湾自古以来就是中国的领土，过去、现在和将来都绝无可能成为什么国家。
Now, Major General, the US has moved a massive amount of military assets into the Middle East from Asia. How will China be seeing these moves? From your military experience and your perspective, do you think that it could possibly make a move on Taiwan, or perhaps other moves in the South China Sea with reduced US presence in the area?
Yeah, again, very sharp and brilliant question. Not many people talk about Taiwan when the Middle East is actually burning. You are absolutely right. You are joining the dots in a very comprehensive manner. What we need to understand is the bigger picture. The bigger picture is neither China nor India, nobody wants any turbulence or the ongoing conflict to go beyond a time limit, or they don't want the conflict actually at all. And everyone should be making an effort, all-out effort to de-escalate the situation, because amongst the major countries which are going to be worst affected, India and China happens to be on the top level. So therefore, they need to make this effort. Now coming to the force ratio, the force level that you are talking of, yes, from 2 aircraft carriers, I am given to understand the 3rd aircraft carrier has already sailed close to Middle East. That is also known, and let's not be ignorant about the fact during the Gulf War, if I respect my memory, there are 6 aircraft carriers. So as on today, America has got around 40,000 troops, maybe much against the political decision taken sometime back in USA to gravitate and pull back their troops, because the dependency on the oil on Middle East had actually changed from December 2019. December 2019 is a landmark timeline where USA, instead of being an importer of oil, had commenced the process of exporting. It had started having surplus in oil, shale gas. And therefore, while it was looking towards west, it started actually looking all over the world for the market. So it has to be understood from that perspective. And from then on till now, and Afghanistan happened to be in 2021. So they pulled back from Afghanistan, much against the requirement of carrying on and extending the global war against terror. USA virtually abandoned the responsibility and pulled back. Now, when you look at that particular incident, troop mobilization, concentration, this is a kind of a preparatory work for USA, as per the President's articulation, to decimate, to destroy, and make sure that Iran ceases to exist and words to that effect. Is it that easy? A country of the size of 2,330 kilometers northwest to southeast, and west to east is around 2,000 kilometers, with 9 crore, 90 million plus population, and look at the structure that they have been having for past 47 years, a theocratic society, and IRGC is there as a supporting echelon, as a paramilitary force to support the supreme leader. They have they have an army, they have a navy, no matter how small it may be. But look at the inventory of the missiles, the drones, the cheaper drones, 20,000 drones, and to neutralize one drone, they require 1 to 3 missiles. Each missile costs them 4 million, 3 missiles, 12 millions. If they use an interceptor, the cost is around 1.5. It can go to as high as 5 million, 7 million, depending on the oncoming projectile. And to make one interceptor, it takes anything between 1.5 to 3 years. That is the time required. Now the strategic reserve of interceptors of America has depleted to a very negligible level. They are supposed to have something around 3,000 to 4,000. As per my study, it reveals that they have gone down to a level of just about 800 to 1,000, which is actually a very, very alarming figure. So therefore, even if they have placed an order for 4 times the annual requirement with the industry, will industry be able to give them in the real time that they require? 3 aircraft carrier are fine, 40,000 to maybe 1 lakh plus, they will start mobilizing the troops. Under the circumstances, everything is happening actually which will compel Iran to take recourse to a symmetric warfare, which is picking up momentum now. They know, Iran knows that they cannot match with USA and Israel together. But if there is no sense and rationality in their approach, if you start threatening countries and ill-treat them, do not follow the rule of engagement or rules-based international order, principles, guidelines, then I'm afraid we are heading for anarchy all over the world. It will be totally out of control. No country in the Middle East will be stable and safe. They have started realizing that with all the armaments and all the architecture of safety and security arsenal that USA has provided, still there are gaps. They can be penetrated and their safety is actually being threatened. Under these circumstances, I still feel that perhaps the Middle East and the Arabic countries will have a second thought. Maybe their alliances may be shifting. Take your mind back to World War I, what was happening? World War II, shifting alliances, grouping and regrouping. A country signing an agreement today, next day they had changed the agreement. Same, Germany was attacking Russia, with whom they had a no war pact within days of signing the agreement. So this is a very, very dangerous situation of polycentricity and multipolarity, because when this thing happens, then the biggest challenge comes: who will listen to whom? USA as a superpower, they have got all the military might, they are the largest economy in the world. I personally feel it will do them good if they bring in some semblance of orderliness, some semblance of logic, some semblance of peace in their thought process and approach. Ukraine has not taken off towards peace and harmony. Middle East has been extended further, new front has been opened up. You never know, this may be a very unavoidable opportunity being provided to the question which you raised, that are we giving a opportunity to China on a platter to go in for reunification of Taiwan? If the answer is yes, I have nothing to say. If the answer is no, then the world order must take this as a turning point of 21st century, must get together. The League of Nations collapsed at some point in time. Okay, thereafter the United Nations came up. United Nations has not been able to deliver what it was initially mandated. It is not able to prevent the conflicts. So how should the world order prepare itself for prevention of conflict, not have arbitrary rules and decision makers like Donald Trump? Whatever he thinks is right is right. You cannot have cherry picking in the international law. That is my answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. Major General Sudakaji, thank you so much for joining us again on the show today. It's been a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Now we move to our next story. The United States and Israel have carried out airstrikes on 5 oil facilities in and near Tehran, Iran, killing 4 people. The attacks triggered massive explosions at the facilities, marking the first reported strikes on Iran's oil infrastructure amid the ongoing regional conflict. Furthermore, the Middle East war has disrupted global oil supplies, prompting Myanmar to introduce restrictions on car use to conserve depleted fuel stocks. Under the new system, vehicles with even-numbered license plates are allowed to drive only on even-numbered days, while odd-numbered plates are restricted to odd-numbered days. However, regional tensions are escalating as energy infrastructure becomes a direct target, raising concerns over wider economic and humanitarian impacts. Regardless, the strikes are being closely monitored by international authorities, with diplomatic repercussions expected in the coming days. Let's listen in.
ဒီလိုလဲဆိုတော့သွားလာတော့အခက်အခဲတော့ရှိတာပေါ့တို့တကယ်တော့မားရမှာကိုကားစုံနံပါတ်ဖြစ်နေတဲ့ခါကျတော့အလူတန်းလို့ကွဲလို့ကွဲတိုင်းလို့အနေထားလေးသွားတဲ့ဘာညာခါကျတော့နည်းနည်းလေးအခက်အခဲတော့ရှိတာပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါလေးပဲဒါပေမဲ့သွားလာတော့အဆင်ပြေပါတော့ကားတွေပါတော့ဟိုချောင်းနာပြတာရောရှိတော့အဆင်တော့ပြေပါသွားလိုက်ကားကြက်တာရောနည်းတက်တယ်အဲ့လိုအဲ့ဒါဆိုလို့ရှိလို့ဆိုတော့အခုတော့ဒီလိုပေါ့စီရလက်ရှိကဒီလိုလုပ်ပေးလိုက်လို့ရှိလို့ရှိရင်တော့ပို့ပြီးတော့အဆင်ပြေတာပေါ့တစ်စီးလုံးတက်လို့ရတယ်နောက်တော့ကိုယ်စီကကိုကသွားလို့ရှိရင်ချိန်ငှပြီးတော့တကယ်လို့မရက်စုံရက်ပေးမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လည်းကိုယ်စီလေးနဲ့ကိုလိုလောက်ထင်းပြီးသွားလို့ရတယ်အဲ့တော့ကိုသွားရင်လည်းသူကခီးလိုက်ရတဲ့အဲ့ဒီအတွက်ကပို့အဆင်ပြေလိမ့်မယ်
Joining us now, we have Mitali Nicosia, who is an economist in New Delhi. Mitali, thank you so much for joining us today and coming on the show. Now, from an economic perspective, how long do you think that it will take for us to see a normalization in the market? Could we see other impacts beyond oil and fuel on the global economy from this war?
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing me in this conversation. I think, there are some areas where we're starting to see the impact already. The first, of course, is oil, as you mentioned, but that feeds into a number of other industries. One of the first industries globally to be hit will be the fertilizer industry, because the fertilizer industry is really where we are starting to see prices go up for global fertilizer imports for countries like the UK, for countries like India, for countries like the US as well, is seeing an increase in import prices for fertilizers. So I think this is going to be one area. And when fertilizer costs increase, of course, the cost of food production increases. Logistics costs are already increasing. As shipping costs increase, we'll start to see, a generalized inflation coming in for manufactured goods, which require shipping routes. This could also have a detrimental impact on international trade per se. Already, we are dealing with a global tariff, uncertainty, and then on top of that, when you add escalating shipping costs, it essentially means countries will start to look inward and will start to reduce import and export flows. So overall, we are looking at several industries getting impacted at the same time through this war.
Mitali, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Now to Europe, hundreds of Cypriots took to the streets of Nicosia to protest British military bases on the island. The demonstrations followed a suspected drone strike at Raf Akratiri, raising local concerns about safety. Protesters carried banners urging the government to remove the UK's sovereign base areas. Organisers warned that the bases turn Cyprus into a potential military target. Cypriot leaders say the issue will be discussed amid growing public unease. Meanwhile, the UK stresses it is strengthening defences around the bases. Let's in fact listen into some of the Cyprus protesters.
Ήρθα γιατί πιστεύω στο δίκαιο των λαών να αποφασίζουν για τη μοίρα τους. Ούτε οι Αμερικάνοι, ούτε οι Ισραηλίτες έχουν το δικαίωμα να αποφασίζουν ποιον πρόεδρο θα έχει κάθε χώρα, τι θα κάνουν τα πετρέλαια της και τον πλούτο. Αν θέλουμε να κάνουμε αλλαγές, είμαστε αρκετά έξυπνοι και ικανοί σαν λαοί να τα κάνουμε μόνοι.
The drone that fell on Akrotiri and all of the things that are happening around, they're not accidental or random events that are happening in the region. They happen because we allow the UK bases in Cyprus and we allow imperial forces to flight their weapons and drones and flights and everything like from our land. Doesn't matter that it's UK soil. What matters is that it's on Cyprus.
The European Union is exploring short-term measures to ease pressures on industries hit by high energy prices. Reports suggest that the EU is reviewing energy taxes, network charges and carbon costs as potential relief options. Companies warned they struggle to compete with rivals in China and the United States even before this week's surge in oil and gas prices linked to the US-Israeli war on Iran. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will present options to EU leaders at a summit on March 19th. The paper also notes governments are underutilising existing tools like state aid and contracts for difference to help industrial consumers stabilise power costs. Brussels says further energy supply disruptions may require measures to encourage reduced consumption as seen in 2022 during the Russian gas cuts. And that's all we have time for. Please keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.